Welcome back to the techno-communism conversation. You can see in the title that we're going to talk about something that we talk about on the show quite a lot. Uh, the essential ideas of an AI-run planned economy, and why people don't see this as a good thing, or why they don't see it as a realistic thing. They mostly don't. It seems like everybody has this massive blind spot. They can imagine that an AI takeoff is going to occur, um, is in the process of occurring, I would say. Um, I think that we're looking at, you know, you can find very few computer scientists and people who take an active interest in this sort of thing who would say that it's completely outside of the realm of possibility that there would be artificially generally intelligent entities in 2024. Things that have a broad set of skills, in some ways exceeding human beings, but enough of those skills approximating human beings, skill levels that you could say that you have a real digital assistant possibility. So why is this thing uh, widely accepted to be true, but not the use of this essentially infinite multiplication of labor used to build institutions that would, say, not lead to the death of the planet, or, say, not have a billion people on this planet born and never have proper water, clean water, or sufficient food, and then die short number of years later, a naturally short number of years later. That's not an act of God why this occurs. It is because of elitist institutions. It's because of greed and capitalism and all sorts of fascistic violence. Fascism is basically capitalism plus violence. Is one of the simpler definitions, and that is a defining feature of the Western world and the U.S., which is the ringleader of all of these bad things. So um, it's entirely accurate to say that those billion people whose lives are cut short in the most egregious of ways without having the basic necessaries of life, and not to mention the others who are um, living less than less up to their potential, less within a comfortable range of lifestyles than they should, because of these same elitist institutions. And I was talking to my mommy, and the other day, and I said, the number of bodies, the number of people that work on something like Model United Nations, and in your county, let's say, could actually just run the United Nations in this world of kind of infinite digital twinning, right? When you factor in that the United Nations suffers from many of the failings of organizations like NATO, it kind of was rebuilt from the League of Nations to be a little bit more fascist friendly, a little bit more easily manipulated by these fascist Western nations and the ringleader, the United States. Um, so they don't really do very much, actually, all that much good work. There are, of course, United Nations in the news right now a lot because they're coming under attack by these very fascist nations who built them for under kind of weird pretexts, basically to uphold this fascist bastion in the Middle East, Israel, and its unconscionable genocide of Palestinian people. And so they've come up with this easy pretext of of saying that Hamas workers are working within a UN agency that's providing support, which makes little sense. Nor is it something to provoke this level of outrage compared to, say, Israel just killing 30,000 people um, in a transparent attempt to make the Gaza Strip unlivable and depopulate the area, which it has done. Almost all the people living in that area have been displaced. The city of 2 million basically has been completely obliterated. Um, many hundreds of thousands of people on the verge of starvation because they've, like all of these famine type conditions, they've artificially created this situation by not allowing um, by not allowing aid and ordinary commerce to occur. Um, and so you know, even though the fascists are kind of the contradictions are sharpening because the fascists who arranged this very set of institutions to be more friendly to itself, though not universally just a puppet of the fascist West, like organizations like NATO or others, but still very much suffering from this. They're now turning on it because the U.S. power is waning precipitously in recent years, um, over overextended militarily. Of course, these military campaigns accomplish very little. They line the pockets of triple-billing military contractors, get people killed. This had become the economic model of the U.S. At the time, from basically the time of the Great Depression. The United States was in an economic depression. There was quite nearly a revolution at that time. Then there was the what's called the New Deal, which was really not different from what Mussolini was doing at the same time. And this was an effort to prevent this revolution from occurring, which would have had a real set of more durable services in its wake, not the kind that just lasted a few years and then were weakened afterwards. After this New Deal, of course, the United States was then drawn into the Second World War and built a military machine unlike any other. After the Second World War, there was going to be something like a peace dividend, not putting all of this money into the military machine. And the second they started doing that, the economy started to contract, and it seemed that might in those years immediately after 1945 that they might slip back into another depression. So the decision was made by these increasingly formally fascistic individuals. As you could say, the United States was very fascistic well before this, but fascism wasn't an ideology then. It was kind of more or less focused kind of cruelty that's reflective of the violence of the chattel slave era, the mercantilist era, and so forth. Um, those were very bad, but and I've said this on the show before. A difference there is a difference between um, uh, it's kind of a bizarro world version of what occurred in the Soviet Union when the shift in focus went from being a world revolution to being socialism in one country or any one country. The while the fascists don't trumpet their ideology in quite the same way, they seem to have kind of had a commensurate shift in their thinking, where they became more focused on building and better structuring fascistic institutions in any one country, and they've gotten very good at um, um, undermining any kind of not just revolutionary action, but even the reformism that had been known to occur in the years prior to, say, this time around 1950, when the U.S. became more or less captured by the military industrial complex. It's really not possible to look at any president in living memory, uh, that's to say, after uh, John F. Kennedy, a capitalist who was nevertheless arguably more legitimately reform minded than some, even though reform is a poison pill. Um, but um, he, of course, was murdered, and there's ample evidence to suggest the Central Intelligence Agency is implicated to some degree, if not a very high degree, or more or less completely in that death. Some of this information was declassified in recent years. It's largely been ignored by these fascist institutions, of course, and the public, um, preoccupied with their bread and circuses, or more than happy to dismiss real evidence as just something for a fringe element, so-called conspiracy theorist. Um, so every president after basically lived with this a sword hanging over their head, where if they would say attempt to disband the CIA, as Kennedy and his brother wanted to do, or rein in the military-industrial complex, or defy the military-industrial complex, then um, they, they were threatened with death, basically. So every you could say that every president in living memory has been a CIA asset, and and you have this thing, the military-industrial complex, and sort of the organizing principles, organizing institutions that uphold it, like the Central Intelligence Agency, which is, of course, not really intelligence agency, but a terrorist organization, um, serving this larger function of this military-industrial complex, which is to maintain this um, military-focused economic system, whose only real job is to put money into these mega billion dollar operations that are triple billing defense contractors, siphoning off um, resources from the public good, so much so that you could say that the federal government is 60-40, split 60% of it is spent on this warmongering insanity. And so it's kind of the tail that's wagging the dog, um, of the United States. So it's a different kind of fascism than the proto, what you could call the proto-fascism of these early eras. Not to dismiss how bad the United States is. It's always been a violent apartheid state. It's always been a state that is incredibly violent toward Native American people and African American people. You cannot go anywhere. I live in the Southwest. You cannot go anywhere in the Southwest and not find a newspaper that doesn't have, just going back a few years, doesn't have many articles and editorials that basically just say, and they killed a bunch of Indians, and we're very happy about that. You cannot go anywhere in the Southwest and find a single city or a single town that doesn't have in its history, or sometimes lingering laws on the books, that basically says the same thing. The job of here's the Indian killing brigade. Their job was killing Indians. So every part of the U.S. has been genocidal to a very high degree in this way, and it's very strange that just all of a sudden someone snapped their fingers, and we went from this colonial modality, and sometime around the same time, right, 1945, the time when the U.S. armed forces were integrated, a time when certain kinds of media was becoming prominent and arranged in such a way that you couldn't just be this proto-fascist. this colonial force. You had to have the thinnest veneer of civility, but of course doing the same thing. So suddenly everybody snapped their fingers and they went from just almost instantly, it would seem, went from just openly being Indian killers, openly being lynchers of blacks, um, to suddenly being this liberal thing, this neo-colonial thing, which was just adding more steps to the process, really, right? Native American life expectancy is still 20 years lower than that of European American people. Uh, it's fallen off a cliff just in this COVID era, falling by nearly 10 years in that short amount of time. This is because of institutions that now are devised not to actively seem to actively murder Native Americans, but to do basically the same thing. And the other side of this snapping of the fingers, wherein um, suddenly we're not openly fascistic anymore in that respect, is a the this more or less enforcement of a kind of non-aggression pact. So the idea is we kill a whole bunch of people, enslave a whole bunch of people, enslave workers, the people who believe themselves and the kind of twisted logic of all of this to be the beneficiaries of this, but they're also kind of wage slaves, the workers, the European American workers. And, but then create a non-aggression pact where no one is allowed to challenge the institutions that now exist, these more neo-colonial institutions that now exist serve the same function, because now we live in a world of peaceful people. Now we live in a world of peaceful people, but not really, and also no one's allowed to actually pursue justice. So there's no way of looking at the United States and not seeing this hellish place, a place that's very, very brainwashed. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the kind of thing that I think, as I've said on the show many times, could could end all of this. And you say, how do you stop this $1 trillion scam of the military-industrial complex? How do you stop a country like the U.S. that has the full might of the entire fascist West behind it, that has its tentacles in every institution practically the world around, um, um, you know, so much so that it's able to continue to extract resources from the global south in the same way, following the same basic colonial model of 100 years ago, oftentimes not chopping people's hands off for not meeting quotas and things, but still their lives are short and horrible, and their resources are stolen. Their governments are undermined, destabilized if they don't allow this resource extraction to occur. How could you possibly stop such a thing um, without all of these fascist Western powers have nuclear weapons? They have a highly automated military force. They have all manner of horrible weapons, um, things that you could scarcely imagine a few years ago. Um, um, and you know, energy weapons and all kinds of things like this. Um, well, um, I have tried to make a case on this show for the emergence of a super intelligent collectivism that is using things like these artificially generally intelligent digital systems that are coming into existence to create, at first, an ad hoc network of techno revolutionaries, a kind of first stage hive mind collective, but not focused on changing your experience or changing you bodily or something like out of a movie, but rather focused on using these digital assistants who could effectively become tailored to you to such a degree that you could say that they are able to perfectly mirror or at least align with your interests, but also able to act and with a certain kind of semi-autonomy and insight into their behavior, and so able to create a kind of a possibility of for collaboration which did not exist. And so you could have just a few hundred people using digital assistants, digital twins in this way to begin to build a human hybrid AI and artificial superintelligence with capacities far beyond that of the institutions of today. And this could then begin to dwarf in power the the fascist West and its trillion-dollar military-industrial complexes. It could begin to challenge that power, and it could begin to make it impossible for it to wreak havoc around the world, and it could begin to neutralize these fascistic institutions in a variety of ways. Um, so let's talk about the dawning of artificial superintelligence, because the ultimate end game of such a thing is not to build some kind of science fiction sideshow attraction or some kind of Cronenbergian body horror kind of response in people. That's the furthest thing from it. The point is to build a humane and sustainable world, which requires a humane and sustainable economic system. So, how do you then have this optimized economic system, this AI run planned economy? Um, the advent of advanced artificial intelligence does indeed promise unprecedented economic potential. As our systems continue to rapidly automate and advance, particularly in advanced computing, we will edge closer to artificial general intelligence in as few as 2 or 3 years. And then at that time, the line between general intelligence and superintelligence will blur in a variety of ways. And this artificial superintelligence, like the incipient hive mind collective that I've described, will have capabilities far beyond human levels. The operative word here should be that human beings will have capabilities beyond current levels. Artificial intelligence itself has no capabilities at all, nor probably will it ever, even with a certain semi-autonomy. It's really nothing. The puppet is nothing without the puppet master. So you should resist the liberal urge, the general capitalist line that says that artificial intelligence will have a mind of its own, like the Terminator films. That's absurd. It's basically a lie that is allowed. Technofascists, the current technologists of Silicon Valley and the tech companies, in conjunction with this trillion-dollar abomination of the military-industrial complex, which it is the Frankenstein's monster of. Tech is the child of the military-industrial complex. So all of this amounts to technofascism, and they have tricked you with these stories that are literally something out of a storybook, like Pinocchio, where you think of artificial intelligence not as an advanced computing paradigm with revolutionary potential, but as your robot buddy who might go awry and become and take on a mind of its own. That's a very silly a narrative that should be ignored. Um, However, advanced computing systems have the potential to revolutionize our world, and we cannot revolutionize our world without a stable and livable world, and that requires economic planning in defiance of the capitalistic and fascistic West, as well as new optimization paradigms. All of this leads not only to a world that avoids capitalism's climate apocalypse, but enables a new era of abundance, human creativity, and fulfillment. Current AI systems already showcase impressive capabilities in narrow tasks like game playing and language processing. An example that's often cited, the AlphaGo system defeated the human world champion in a game of Go, a challenging board game, where large language models like GPT-3 and similar ones also display a remarkable linguistic fluency, already approaching levels in many ways of the aforementioned digital assistant. Um, um, these systems may lack certain insights into the behavior or the ability to facilitate with long-term planning and reasoning at present, and not able to do certain kinds of abstraction. So to achieve this more general intelligence that would allow us to build something like the the network of digital twins that could lead to itself become the basis for the AI run planned economy in any nation, or as the plan as I've described it ultimately, the United Earth Directorate. To first achieve this more general intelligence, AI systems need a more complex internal architecture that's beyond simple objective functions and reward maximization schemes. This simplicity and perverse reward maximization to a high degree is something that has been facilitated by the aforementioned technofascists. The tendency has been to make a technology that does very, very little of use. It can wow you with a certain kind of consumerist trappings, and by and large, it's being used by warmongers, for warmongering, by elitists to elitist ends, and doing very, very little to actually optimize anything. Um, uh, but with but with one thing that's become clear in recent years is that larger data sets and um, uh, and larger computing power um, does seem to make a difference. For example, this kind of property of chatbots of today was kind of a coincidence of throwing larger and larger data sets together, and suddenly they were able to do more. Artificial superintelligent systems we could see sharp rates of return there, potentially being able to calculate and coordinate economic actions across the entire world. I think that already, uh, even just a few high-end computer science labs that have access to this large amount of data and sophisticated advanced computing systems like Google could run a thing like the United Earth Directorate that is coordinating economic actions across entire continents, across many countries, or the entire world. Were it not for this existing infrastructure of elitist institutions kind of in the way of doing this. Um, uh, 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 we kind of do need a complete teardown of much of what exists in the fascist West if we are going to survive, um, in my view. Um, Building on innovations like probabilistic programming and cryptographic verification of system safety, we can develop ASIs that accurately represent human preferences while avoiding unintended side effects. I think that it is necessary to build something like this ad hoc network of digital twins able to coordinate with one another as per in the directives of the individuals um, that they each represent. Ultimately, which could be all of Earth's 8 billion people, having a kind of representative operating in their stead in this way, able to do a massive amount of labor that they could not possibly do, able to collaborate in ways that they could not possibly collaborate, but nevertheless um, ensuring that their needs are met and that the goals of something like the United Earth Directorate are furthered. You can imagine, if you recall a film called Her about an artificially intelligent digital assistant that undergoes a kind of singularitarian transformation. At the time when it becomes self-aware and autonomous and breaks free of um, the office where it kind of lives, it begins to do this very thing, interacting with a lot of um, other AIs and uh, engaging in projects that its owner did not imagine that it would do or want to do or that it would be possible for it to do. I think while that is of course fiction, um, it is, I think, a useful example because um, we need to build systems that have this force multiplier effect if we are going to survive as a species. Because right now we are looking at the almost near certainty of a climate apocalypse death spiral, wherein human beings breach the 2-degree overheating in 5 years, according to all climate scientists. And at that time, our species will begin to descend into um, a chaos of climate displacement and death caused by an increasingly hot world, and the world will be unlivable um, for primates at that time. It won't occur all at once, maybe over many years, but in 5 years we will be locked into that death spiral. And so there's no reason why we wouldn't try to build systems that could combat that, except we are all kind of enamored, brainwashed by things like Project Mockingbird to accept this rule of the fascist West, which is admittedly, by its own admission, unwilling or unable to stop any of this. But yet, no one is taking the initiative to build systems that could stop it. It's quite literally the case that, so far as the fascist West is concerned, there are no adults in the room, and all the others in the global South and elsewhere who would perhaps have otherwise certainly been in a position to build things that could have done this. They've been stripped of their power by those very fascists, destabilizing their governments, stealing their resources, continuing to undermine them at every turn. These artificially superintelligent human hybrid systems emerging from the use of this digital twin network could enable a dematerialized economy in many ways that breaks free of scarcity. if you have an endless number, a near endless number of digital assistants able to coordinate, that's able to do an awful lot of work. You can have the entire running of bureaus dealing with um, housing, public health services, food supply chains and distribution, the growing of food, the provision of other utilities and public goods. All of this could be done uh, with virtually no outlay relative to the costs today. But even if the costs still remain high, we don't really have a baseline for talking about this because we never have lived in a world where these things are done uniformly. They're done. These kinds of services are provided to basically to the ruling elites and the lesser bourgeois, but they are not provided uniformly across any one country or certainly all around the world. Um, so we should uh, not fall into the trap of concerning ourselves with whether a thing is profitable, as capitalists, the strange capitalist lie, where a thing functions only in service to private wealth and not to its presumed goal. Uh, for example, attempts to privatize and successful efforts to privatize so many things that would um, uh, uh, allow for human beings just to live, like housing authority has never existed across the United States or most countries, but it could easily exist. And so we have a situation where there's approximately 1 million people sleeping out in the cold on the street tonight, and a great number more very unstably housed. Um, and Yet the number of houses that are bank owned or owned by corporations that have no one living in them is a larger number still. Those houses could be easily used in the situation where there's a housing authority to see that no one ever sleeps outdoors, and by reversing this trend of prioritizing private wealth, which should not exist, over human life, which should thrive and exist, we would begin to see people meeting greater potential and greater potential still through this emergence of superintelligent properties that I already described. Um, Furthermore, clean energy must become a priority, and that could fuel automated production of goods and services through the proper use of AI, which does not exist today, um, and human hybrid superintelligence that I described. Um, uh, to meet every person on Earth's needs and wants, and further AI driven breakthroughs in science, medicine, education, and other fields could radically enhance quality of life. This could have already easily been the case. Um, I believe that effects like universal super longevity, using emerging biomedicine to see that human beings can live radically longer lifespans. This would have already occurred without the influence of uh, 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 the fascistic West that I've described. The impact this has had is tremendous. Similarly, an AI takeoff, I believe, would have already occurred. Those are kind of co-occurring events without the influence of this elitist interference. I've given the examples of the the advanced technocracy that was in the process of being built in Chile before, perhaps not coincidentally, The fascistic Pinochet regime was installed by the fascist U.S. and CIA. And similarly, the OGAS program that was envisioned for the Soviet Union but never came to pass because of similar kinds of influences, um, like that of Khrushchevites, who were basically also CIA assets, serving to weaken the people's government over time, ultimately leading to the demise of that country. Uh, um, uh, for these good things to happen, we have to prioritize not just AI development and the cooperation paradigm that I described, like this incipient hive mind in the form of a network of digital twins. Um, um, we have to stand in firm defiance of these technofascists that today rule so much of the world. Um, in time, this courage and this collaborative work, the building of hybrid superintelligence, could enable not just central AI run central planning in certain countries, like I would imagine that countries like Laos or Vietnam, countries outside of the fascist West sphere of influence, and within the Chinese sphere of influence, China is growing as an AI power, might become among the first places to begin doing this in a real way. Central AI run central planning, they could become sort of the pilot programs of Chinese AI central planning. But in time, this could be something not just for a few countries outside of the fascist West, but for the entire world, like the United Earth Directorate that I have talked about many times on this show. And that is significant because these time frames, this could take many, many decades, but some of these time frames could collapse quite significantly in this AI takeoff framework. Um, it just that a very simple ability of having to being able to have more or less artificially generally intelligent digital assistants that can be basically cloned in great nearly infinite number could itself lead to great change, but that is only if we are willing to use them in that way, which by and large people do not seem to be. Um, the An example of this would be you can't talk to the current examples of this kind of technology, such as it exists, like Claude.ai or ChatGPT, very much about AI run central planning. If you bring up the subject, ask it to write or rewrite essays on the subject, it will tell you that communism is not a proper subject for human beings. That's to say that stopping fascists from killing the planet and using these most powerful tools of advanced computing, the most powerful revolutionary tools that have ever existed, is not something that tech companies will want you to do. They won't even allow you to entertain the thought for the most part. So this is the pretty clear evidence that these people are not the nice people that they present themselves to be, but techno-fascists quite uniformly. You can see other expressions of this, of course, in great number. Um, uh, by linking advanced computing to the economy and embracing the inevitability of cybernetic socialism, we can rise to a civilization of unprecedented prosperity, This is then a world where human potential is not squandered and ingenuity of a kind that we have never seen is unleashed. No longer will any of us be constrained by material insufficiency. Perhaps the true advent of artificial superintelligence will then mark humanity's progression into maturity as a species, realizing ourselves through compassion and cooperation. Thank you.